The day my son asked why his uncle slept in my bed was the day my old life ended. I was at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables for lunch, half listening to Ethan talk about cartoons, when he dropped the question like it was nothing. He sat on a bar stool, little legs swinging, cookie crumbs on his shirt. "Mom, why does Uncle Jason sleep in your room when you go on trips?" The knife slipped out of my hand and hit the cutting board with a crack. For a second, I just stared at it, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I forced my face into what I hoped was a normal mom smile and turned toward him. "What do you mean, honey?" He shrugged and reached for another cookie, completely calm, like he had just asked why the sky was blue. "Last time you went to see Grandma, I had a bad dream and went to find Dad. But Uncle Jason was coming out of your room. He said Dad told him to sleep here so he could watch us." My blood went cold. That trip to Seattle had been weeks ago. I had gone to see my mother and speak at a work conference. I remembered FaceTiming Mark from the hotel. I remembered Jason texting me a dumb meme about the weather. Jason. My older brother. Mark's best friend since college. The man who had stood next to us at our wedding as best man. The one who never missed a birthday, a holiday, or an excuse to show up with some over-the-top present for Ethan. The one who called me sis in that easy way that used to feel warm and now felt like a joke. "My name is Lauren, and this is how I took my life back." I ruffled Ethan's hair and made my voice light. "Uncle Jason probably just needed somewhere to sleep, baby. You know how small his place is. Now go play in your room so I can finish lunch, okay?" He hopped off the stool and ran down the hall. As soon as he disappeared, my hands started shaking. I grabbed my phone like it was a life raft and opened my calendar. I travel a lot for work. I do consulting, which sounds boring on paper but pays well and keeps me on planes a few times a month. For almost 10 years of marriage, I had never questioned leaving Mark in charge at home. He was the creative one, the graphic designer, the fun parent. Jason floated around our lives as the star brother who somehow made time for everyone. I scrolled through months of entries. Seattle. Denver. Chicago. Another Seattle. Every trip neatly color-coded. Every trip a chance for something to happen while I was gone. I felt sick. I thought about mentioning it right then, confronting Mark as soon as he came downstairs. But Ethan's voice echoed in my head. "Uncle Jason was coming out of your room. Mark told him to stay." No. I needed to be sure. I had spent my whole life doubting myself while everyone else worshipped Jason. Our mother still introduced him at dinners as my son the investor from New York, and then waved at me like I was an afterthought. "And this is Lauren. She does some kind of consulting." I was done being the one who looked crazy. That evening, while Mark was scrolling through his laptop on the couch, I casually dropped the bait. "Hey," I said, rinsing dishes, my voice steady. "Boston called. They want me on site next week for a client meeting. Might be a couple of days." He barely glanced up. "Sure, babe. I will hold down the fort." Then I watched his jaw twitch. His fingers moved fast over his phone. For half a second, a smile flickered across his face, a private little flash he did not bother to share with me. When he noticed me watching, he cleared his throat and went back to his laptop. That smile told me more than any confession ever would. I went upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom, and stared at my reflection. Pale skin. Dark circles. Eyes that suddenly looked older than my age. I had always been the steady one, the responsible sister, the background girl. Jason got Yale, the fancy job, the applause. I got state school, a solid career, and the satisfaction of building my own success without anyone's help. At least I had my own family, I used to think. My own home. Something that was mine. Now even that felt like a lie. I opened the Notes app and started typing out every trip from the last year. Dates, cities, how long I had been gone. If Ethan had seen Jason coming out of my bedroom during one of those trips, how many other times had it happened? How long had this been going on right under my nose? The morning of my so-called Boston trip, I kissed Ethan while he was still half asleep, tossed a suitcase into the trunk, and pulled out of the driveway like always. Mark stood on the porch with his coffee, waving. "Drive safe," he called. "Text me when you land." I smiled, waved back, and turned the corner. As soon as I was out of sight, I kept driving another 10 minutes and checked into a mid-range hotel off the highway. No flight. No Boston. Just me, a fake reservation, and a plan. Then I headed right back toward my neighborhood. I parked on a side street with a clear line of sight to our driveway, heart pounding like I was on some undercover mission instead of spying on my own husband. I bought a cheap pair of binoculars from a sporting goods store on the way and had them sitting on the passenger seat next to my coffee. Around 8:30, I saw Mark leave for his so-called job, portfolio bag over his shoulder. Our nanny arrived, took Ethan to school, and locked up. By mid-morning, the house was quiet. I sat there for hours, second-guessing myself. Maybe Ethan had misunderstood. Maybe Jason had just crashed there once. Maybe I was about to blow up my whole life over nothing. Then a silver Tesla turned into my driveway. Jason. He stepped out in his perfect business casual outfit, talking on his phone, laughing at something. He pulled a key from his pocket, the emergency key I had given him years ago, and let himself into my house like he owned it. I watched that closed front door for what felt like forever. Shadows moved past the living room window. Time dragged. Around lunchtime, I saw him walk past the upstairs window. My bedroom window. When he finally came out, my stomach flipped. His hair was damp, like he had just showered. His crisp work shirt was gone, replaced with a soft t-shirt and jeans. He locked the door behind him, checked his phone, and drove away. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, fingers numb. Then I drove back to the hotel and barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. When there was nothing left in my stomach, I rinsed my mouth, sat on the edge of the tub, and reached for my laptop. If I let myself collapse now, they would win. Years ago, when Mark and I first got married, I had set up our family phone plan. I was the one who dealt with bills and accounts. He had never cared about the boring details, which meant he had also never asked for the master password. I logged into the account and pulled up the call and text records. There they were. Hundreds of messages between Mark and Jason, going back months. No explicit sex or anything obvious. Just harmless-looking lines. See you soon. Cannot wait. Same stupid jokes repeated at weird hours. The calls told the real story. Every time I left town, Jason called within an hour of my plane supposedly taking off. Long calls. Sometimes they talked until after midnight. Sometimes there were multiple calls in a single night. My chest ached, but I kept going. I opened our bank account and sorted by cash withdrawals. Thick clusters of large amounts, always the day before my trips. 1,000 here. 2,000 there. Over and over. When I added them up, the total sat just under 30,000. Money I had earned. Money I thought we were saving for Ethan's future and our kitchen renovation. Next came the credit cards. Hotel charges downtown on nights I was supposedly across the country. Heavy bills from trendy restaurants Mark and I had talked about trying someday. Purchases at a jewelry store I did not recognize. Curious and terrified, I searched the store online. The website loaded with glossy photos of luxury men's accessories. Watches. Cufflinks. Rings. Jason had been showing off a new watch at our last family dinner. A fancy piece he had joked was a little gift to himself after closing a big deal. The date of the purchase on my statement matched my Denver trip exactly. While I had been flying home exhausted, Mark had been buying my brother a watch with money out of my pocket. Enough, I thought. No more guessing. No more hoping I was wrong. By the time the sky outside the hotel window turned dark, I had made my next move. The next morning, I was going to walk into the shadiest electronics store I could find and buy cameras. Tiny ones. With audio. The kind that could hide inside a smoke detector and a bookshelf frame. If Mark and Jason wanted to turn my home into their playground, I was done watching from the outside. The next time I went on a trip, I would not be sitting in a parked car with binoculars. I would be watching them live on my phone, every word, every touch, every lie. And once I had that proof, I would stop being the forgotten little sister and become something they had never seen before. A woman they should have been smart enough never to cross. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark of the hotel room, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. Jason's laugh. Mark's voice. The sound of their glasses clinking in my house. Every second burned into my head. By morning, I had made up my mind. I wasn't just going to catch them, I was going to bury them. I called a lawyer I'd worked with once on a client contract. Melissa Grant. Sharp, tough, the the kind of woman who scared rich men into settling before trial. I told her I needed a private meeting. When we met in her downtown office, she looked me over once, took in my clenched jaw, and closed the door. "Tell me everything," she said. I did. The cameras, the stolen money, the forged signatures, the condo, even the STD test. She didn't flinch. When I finished, she tapped her pen on the desk. "You've got more than enough," she said. "We'll get you the house, full custody of your son, and restitution for the stolen funds. But first, you lock down your assets. Move half of everything into accounts he can't touch. Do it today." I nodded. "I can do that." "And Lauren," she paused, meeting my eyes, "don't confront him yet. Let him think he's safe. The more rope he has, the easier it'll be to hang himself." I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. That night, I went home like nothing had changed. Mark was in the kitchen cooking pasta, acting like the perfect husband. I smiled, kissed Ethan goodnight, and ate dinner beside the man who didn't know his life was already collapsing. He talked about weekend plans. I nodded and asked polite questions. I was already transferring money to my new account under the table, one finger scrolling on my phone, smiling across the candlelight. The next day, Daniel the investigator called again. He sounded almost impressed. "You were right," he said. "Your husband quit his job weeks ago. He's been lying about going to the office every day." I stopped walking. "What?" "He's been using the time to work on his photography. Meaning he's at home with your brother while you think he's at work." I closed my eyes. "He's been living off my money completely." Daniel hesitated. "There's more. Your brother's condo isn't just for them. He's been bringing other people there, too. Looks like multiple partners." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles hurt. So my husband and my brother were lying to each other, too. By the time I hung up, the last of my fear was gone. They weren't clever masterminds. They were selfish idiots who thought I'd never notice. That night, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked tired, but different. Sharper. More dangerous. I was done being quiet. I whispered to my reflection, "Tomorrow, we start the war." Because this time, I wasn't the fool in the story. I was going to be the ending. I woke up early and the house felt too quiet, like a stage set between acts. Ethan's cereal bowls were still in the sink, the cartoons paused on the TV, but the usual clutter that meant life was happening was missing. I poured coffee and opened my laptop, fingers steady now. There was no room for trembling. There was only work to do. Daniel had already sent a stack of documents overnight. Bank transfers, LLC filings, timestamps, surveillance stills from the condo, payment records to vendors who furnished that second life. Each PDF was a nail. I flipped through them like a professional cataloging evidence, not a woman whose brother had slept in her bed and whose husband had used her money. The forensic accountant had done immaculate work. The money trail was ugly and precise. 60,000 moved in structured withdrawals. Gifts purchased in cash. Transfers into accounts that matched the condo utilities. Everything lined up. Melissa wanted to wait until Rachel had something concrete before we pulled the trigger. She said timing made the difference between a settlement and a scorched earth wrecking ball. I agreed. I wanted it loud, public, and irreversible. I wanted them to watch as their carefully staged life burned. So we fed Rachel clues, enough to make her hire her own investigator, but not enough to fully collapse anything too soon. I met Rachel for coffee under the pretext of sister-in-law bonding. We were both different women than the ones who had smiled at each other at holiday dinners. Her laugh had new edges. Her eyes were hollowed by suspicion. I handed her a printed copy of a hotel receipt I found by chance, one that matched a night I had been tracking on the camera feed. She held it like it was evidence from a cold case. I did not tell her everything. I wanted her reaction to be raw and real when the whole truth hit. I watched her anger turn to resolve in real time, and when she left the cafe, she had the posture of someone ready to take a wrecking ball to her marriage. That alone felt like progress. Once Rachel was on the path, Melissa and I shifted into litigation mode. We froze accounts Mark could access, filed temporary restraining requests on shifting assets, and had the forensic accountant compile a formal report suitable for court. We also drafted a civil complaint that read like a punch list: infidelity, financial misconduct, fraud. Melissa warned me about revenge fantasies and told me to save them for after the legal work. I laughed then, but I did what she said. Focus. Evidence. Strategy. Meanwhile, Daniel uncovered more ugliness. The condo had subscription services for discreet apps, payments to phone numbers linked to anonymous dating profiles, and receipts for gifts sent to people I had never met. The storage unit had more than photos. There were binders labeled with dates and locations, a scrapbook of secret escapes. I felt like an archaeologist of betrayal, peeling back layers and finding more every time I thought the dig was done. We scheduled the divorce papers to be served on the same morning. Melissa arranged for process servers to arrive at Mark's apartment and to hand a set to Nolan at his office. We wanted simultaneous detonations so they could not warn each other, so no one had a chance to hide funds or adjust stories. The plan was clinical and satisfying. It felt like finally drawing a breath after holding it underwater for months. The day before the filings, Rachel called me. Her voice shook but was steady at the same time. She had photos from her investigator. Close-ups of Mark leaving the condo, a receipt for a watch purchase that matched an item I had seen on Jason, a note in a box that read like a nickname between two men. She was ready. We coordinated our statements, our steps, who would call whom and when. Two betrayed women working together with a clean, unstoppable aim. On the morning of the serving, I stayed home with Ethan. He wanted pancakes and cartoons and crayons, and I gave them to him wholeheartedly because he deserved a normal morning. When the nanny came and took him to school, I drove to Melissa's office, sat in the lobby, and drank terrible coffee. My hands were not shaking. Adrenaline and a fierce sort of calm had taken over. The first call came within an hour. Mark. He sounded like someone who had stubbed his toe and then fallen off a ladder. He begged, pleaded, called me by pet names that had hollowed out into manipulation months ago. He said he could explain everything. He said we could go to therapy. He said he loved me. I let the voicemail fill my inbox like a frozen relic of the man he used to pretend to be. Then came a different ring. My mother. She was an early riser and called to ask if I wanted to stop by for lunch. I decided to go. If nothing else, she would see me in daylight, see Ethan laughing across the table, understand that my life was intact even if part of it had been broken. At my mother's house, we sat in her sunroom with tea. Photos of Jason were everywhere on the mantel. His Yale diploma, a framed article about an investment, a happy family portrait with Rachel and the twins. Her voice caught when she asked how work was going. I told her the truth in small, measured pieces. Her face shifted from confusion to alarm to disbelief. When I finally placed a folder of documents on the coffee table, she recoiled as if I had slapped her. "This is not like him," she said. "He's been so good to everyone. He is brilliant." He would never. I watched her try to thread the old story that made sense in her head with the new evidence that refused to fit. It was brutal to witness. I wanted her to feel the betrayal the way I had, but I also wanted her to see the truth. When she asked why I was telling her, I said because she had to know, and because people who protect their golden children from consequence enable the next betrayal. Her voice became small. "I had raised you to be better than this," she said. "I had always thought you were reckless, but never cruel." "What have you done?" I told her simply that I'd done what I had to do to protect my son and my life. She looked at me as if I were a stranger who had carved away a part of herself. She was hurt, then ashamed, then somewhere in between. The room hummed with old loyalties being severed. By midday, the story had opened like a floodgate. Both divorces were filed. The process servers did their jobs. Melissa emailed me the filed paperwork, the complaints, the motions for temporary orders, the asset freeze. It was all there, stark and legal and irreversible. They had no idea what hit them. Both men called and left me messages that ranged from anger to pleading to threats. I saved each one like currency. Word started to leak in faster than anticipated. Rachel's mother called, then my mother called again with trembling updates, and a cousin texted with a short, shocked message about people gossiping at a brunch. The social earthquake had begun. That evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. It was the private investigator Daniel. He said he had something new and he wanted to meet that night. He would not say over the phone. "Come to the diner on 5th in an hour," he said. "Bring nothing." I folded my hands under the table at Melissa's office, looked at her, and she nodded. We went together. The diner booth felt like a confessional, and Daniel sat across from us with an envelope and a face that said the next card would be lethal. Inside were photos of more than just Mark and Jason. In the background of a picture taken at one of Jason's claimed conferences was a face I recognized from a dating profile he had used months earlier. Invoices showed payments to a man whose name matched a pseudonym on an app. There was a list of emails and numbers, connections that suggested our two men had been more brazen and more careless than they imagined. Melissa touched my hand. "This is enough," she said. "We can take this to the DA if you want." Criminal charges could be on the table for fraud and conspiracy, particularly with the forged signatures and deliberate siphoning of funds. I thought of the quiet of the hotel room, of the sound of their laughter in my living room, of Ethan's small voice asking a simple question over lunch that had started all this. I thought of how easy it had been for them to hide behind familiarity and kindness while they dismantled my life from within. "No," I said finally. "Not yet. Let the civil suit finish. Let the assets be frozen. Let them feel the court pressure. But if they try to hide or flee, bring the criminal angle. I want them hurt, but I want them hurt legally, permanently. If prison follows, it follows." Daniel nodded. He slid a small flash drive across the table. "For now, this is your arsenal," he said. I wrapped the drive in a napkin and tucked it into my purse. Outside, the evening had teeth. Rain started to fall and the streetlights blurred into soft halos. I felt the world tilt and then settle. I was steering. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with a single text from an unknown number. "Don't think you won yet." The message read, "You made a big mistake." I looked at the road through the windshield and the lights smeared into streaks. Whoever had sent the text thought they could scare me. They did not know the depth of what I had set into motion. They did not know how many hands were already on the reins. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light was on and the front door was slightly ajar. Inside, a single thing sat on the kitchen table that did not belong to me, a small, leather box with a Rolex emblem. The tag was flipped open and there was no receipt. My stomach clenched. Then a moment later my phone buzzed again. A new voicemail from Mark. I did not listen. I stood on the porch, the rain starting to soak my hair, and felt the full weight of what I'd begun. There would be hearings, lawyers, press, and more pain than I could imagine. But there would also be justice. I picked up the leather box and opened it. Inside lay a watch, the same one I had seen Jason wearing, pristine and arrogant on its pillow. A small note tucked underneath said simply, "You should have trusted me." I swallowed and dropped the note into the sink. Tomorrow the courthouse would open and the war would move out of whispers and into cold wood and steel. For tonight, I wiped down the kitchen table, put the box in a bag, and went upstairs to tuck Ethan in. He curled up beside me, trusting and warm, and I promised him pancakes in the morning. When I kissed his forehead, I meant it. I had stolen back my life bit by bit. The next moves would be louder and meaner, and I was ready. The courthouse felt colder than I expected, like the building itself was trying to stay impartial while everything inside it was falling apart. I walked into the lobby with Melissa at my side and Daniel a few steps behind, the small flash drive in my purse the weight of a grenade. People glanced. Phones glanced. Rumors moved faster than the elevator. My mother waited in the second row of the gallery, hands clenched, face pale but steady. She met my eye and for a moment I saw the confused woman who had loved the wrong child and also the woman who was trying to fix it. Rachel was there too, shoulders set, the twins with her, eyes burning like coals. We did not speak. We did not need to. We had both read the same language of betrayal and chosen to fight. Melissa moved through the motions like a surgeon. We had temporary restraining orders, asset freezes, and a forensic report that read like a crime novel. The judge listened without expression, stamping papers, calling things by their legal names, alleged fraud, alleged conspiracy, temporary custody. Lawyers for Mark and Jason flailed and preened, trying to spin the story into something sympathetic. It did not work. Evidence sat on the table like a heavy thing you could not ignore. Outside the courtroom, the press had started to circle. A local business blog picked up the headline about a venture capitalist under investigation, and the phones lit up. Melissa had already told me to expect leaks. She was right. A reporter asked me one pointed question in the courtyard, and I answered with the only truth I could spare. My son is my priority. Everything else is legal business. The camera clicked. The microphone recorded. The line between private pain and public spectacle had been crossed, and there was no going back. That night, after the judge signed temporary orders, we met at Melissa's office to map the next moves. Erica, the forensic accountant, had finished a supplemental report. The total siphoned funds now read higher than we first thought. I felt the numbers in my chest like a second, cold heartbeat. Melissa suggested we negotiate a civil settlement and hold the criminal options like a thread over their heads. She wanted to use the DA's interest as leverage to make sure both men faced the full consequences. Rachel agreed to coordinate statements and to keep the girls away from any public exposure. She wanted privacy for the twins. I wanted to protect Ethan from the fallout. We both wanted them to lose everything they had built on lies. The plan had a clinical pulse: freeze, litigate, expose, destroy the facade. It felt righteous and terrible in equal measure. Then the threats started. First a text from an unknown number: "You ruined us." Then a voicemail left on my phone with heavy breathing and a male voice saying things that made my skin prickle. Melissa filed for an emergency protective order, and Daniel traced the call to a prepaid SIM card bought cash in a convenience store. The handwriting was messy, but the threat was real. I slept in short bursts. Ethan slept through it all, innocent and tired. He still asked me where Daddy was going sometimes, and I invented mundane answers. He drew pictures and colored suns no one could smear with darkness. Protecting him became the axis of everything I did. A week later, the defense produced a last-ditch motion. They wanted the cameras excluded because they were allegedly planted without consent. They claimed the recordings were a violation of privacy. It was the only play they had left that might muddy the water. Melissa said courts hate to throw out evidence that shows fraud, but you never know until the judge decides. It felt like watching a match become a gamble. On the morning of the hearing to decide the admissibility of the cameras, I almost stayed home. I would have missed it if not for Rachel, who called and said with hard calm, "You need to be there. They will try to gaslight us in person. The truth is weight. You are the weight." So I put on a dress that did not try to hide the fact I was angry, and I walked into the courtroom with my head up. The defense attorney made a show of moral outrage, reciting privacy statutes and technicalities. He painted them as two consenting adults trapped by opportunistic cameras and vengeful litigation. I felt weeks pile on like winter coats as he spoke. My life, my house, my son, reduced to a legal argument. Melissa countered like a blade. She handed the judge the bank records, the LLC filings, Daniel's investigative notes. She framed the camera footage as corroborating evidence that tied the financial fraud and the physical meetings together. She called it a mosaic. Pieces that alone were ugly, together undeniable. Then something unexpected happened. The prosecution lawyer, a calm man in a cheap suit from the DA's office, cleared his throat and pushed a thin manila envelope across the table to Melissa. I watched her slide the papers out and then blink. Inside were copies of emails between Jason and one of his supposed investors that contradicted the narrative he had told my mother, messages that showed coaching about maintaining appearances, and an attachment with a bank transfer that matched one of the withdrawals from our account. The DA had been quietly looking too. He had a full folder the defense had not seen coming. The judge scanned the documents and set a date for the fraud investigation to proceed. The cameras stayed admissible. I felt a bright flare of triumph that turned quickly into cold. The DA's involvement meant the fall could be more than civil. It meant prison. It meant that a man my mother had trusted might go to jail. I had wanted justice, but I had not wanted to become the agent of someone else's ruin. That nuance was gone. Outside the courthouse that afternoon, men with microphones shouted questions. A local TV crew wanted a statement. I managed a short answer. I allowed myself to say I would cooperate with investigators. I refused to answer sensational questions about sex lives and private choices. The cameras showed what they showed. The law would decide the rest. That night, in the quiet of my kitchen, I opened the leather box Jason had left on my table. Melissa had told me not to touch anything, but I needed the small, human certainty of touching it. The Rolex gleamed like an accusation. I placed it in a drawer and locked it away. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number again. This time a message. A live link. A streaming video URL. I almost deleted it, but curiosity broke through. I tapped the link. The screen lit with a shaky live feed of my living room. The frame was dark, but I recognized the pattern on the rug. The camera angle was odd, like someone had propped a phone on the mantel. The timestamp was live. My heart skidded. And then a voice spoke, muffled and rough. "You think you can stop us?" it said. He laughed. "He said your mother will regret this. He said your son will miss you." The line cut off and the video ended. My hands went numb. I threw the phone on the counter and grabbed my keys. I was going to the address Daniel had traced for the last anonymous caller. I would not wait to see if the next message was worse. I drove through rain-smeared streets with sirens in the distance and a focus that felt like a blade. Whoever had sent that live feed had crossed a line. The building Daniel gave me was an old warehouse converted into temporary office space. The door was unlocked. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed. No one sat at the reception desk. A single office door stood ajar and a white curtain hung like a thin wall. I pushed the curtain aside and stopped cold. On a folding table, facing the wall, sat a laptop open to the same live feed I had just seen, my living room in the glow. Around the laptop, scattered like confetti, were photos. Close-ups of Ethan at the park. Ethan sleeping with a stuffed bear. A picture of my son holding up a crayon sun I recognized from the fridge. There were also photos of my mother, grainy images taken through curtains, a picture of Melissa loading files into her car, and a shot of Daniel at a coffee shop with his coat on. Someone had been watching all of us. Then I heard a footstep behind me. I turned slowly, the room shrinking. The curtain rustled. A shadow fell over the laptop screen and the lights clicked off. A voice very close to my ear said, soft and familiar in a way that made Bao rise, "You pushed too hard, sis." I knew that voice. It was Jason. I didn't sleep after that text. Every creak in the hotel hallway sounded like footsteps. Every car outside felt like it was stopping for me. At sunrise, I called Daniel. He answered immediately, already on his way to meet detectives at the warehouse. They'd found fingerprints, Jason's, and one of the missing hard drives. Whatever he'd been planning, it wasn't just to scare me. He'd been collecting information, maybe even blackmail material. Melissa showed up at the hotel an hour later, coffee in one hand and legal folders in the other. She looked exhausted but focused. "They've issued a restraining order," she said. "And the DA's office wants to accelerate the fraud charges. He's running out of room. What if he doesn't care?" I asked quietly, glancing at Ethan, still asleep in the bed. "What if he wants to take me down with him?" "Then we make sure he can't," she said. By noon, I'd moved Ethan to my mother's house with a police patrol nearby. She didn't argue this time, just nodded, pale and silent. For the first time in my life, she didn't defend Jason. Daniel called that evening. "Lauren, listen carefully," he said. "We found camera equipment in Jason's car, and he's been using multiple SIM cards. He's watching, but he's sloppy now. We can catch him." I hung up and looked out the hotel window. The city lights blurred in the drizzle. Somewhere out there, my brother was unraveling, turning from a liar into something darker. For years, I'd lived in his shadow. Now I could feel him trying to pull me back into it. But this time, I wasn't running. I was going to end it on my terms. 2 days later, everything finally collapsed. The police caught Jason at a rundown motel outside Portland. He was sitting alone in his car with a duffel bag full of cash and 2 prepaid phones. When they pulled him out, he didn't fight. He didn't shout. He just looked empty, like someone who'd already lost everything long before the handcuffs went on. Melissa called me that afternoon. "They got him," she said. "He's in custody." I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the wall for a long time. After all the chaos, all the lies, all the nights I'd spent waiting for the next blow, it was finally over. I could breathe again, even if it didn't feel real yet. "He's not getting out anytime soon," Melissa continued. "The DA added stalking and fraud charges. He's facing serious prison time. Good, I said. That was all there was to say. That night, I went home. The house felt different, quiet, but haunted. The police had already removed the cameras and done a full sweep, yet I could still feel the weight of everything that had happened there. Every room carried an echo of a lie. I walked through it all anyway, slowly, deliberately, touching the walls, opening the blinds, letting light in again. When I reached the kitchen, I stopped. The vase on the counter still held the flowers Ethan had picked for me last week, half wilted but still bright. Somehow, that small thing broke me. Not in pain this time, but in relief. We'd made it through. A week later, the court finalized everything. Jason's assets were frozen, his accounts drained to pay restitution to Rachel and me. The condo was sold, the fake company dissolved. Every dollar he stole was tracked and recovered. Mark's settlement went through the same day, full repayment, supervised visits, no contest. He didn't even try to fight it. At the last hearing, he looked smaller than I remembered. He said he never meant to hurt me, but I didn't believe him. I told him he just didn't care enough not to. Then I turned and walked out of that courtroom and didn't look back. Rachel and I stayed close. What started as family by marriage had turned into something stronger, survivors bound by truth. She rebuilt her life piece by piece. I did too. Ethan bounced back faster than I expected. Therapy helped, but mostly it was time and consistency. He laughed again, slept through the night, asked questions that no longer scared me to answer. When he mentioned Jason, I told him simply that his uncle made some bad choices, but that we were safe now. And we were. Months passed. The headlines faded. The calls stopped. My business picked up again, stronger than ever. For the first time in years, my life was quiet, honest, steady mine. One morning, I sat on the porch with my coffee, watching the sunrise. The air smelled like wet grass and something new. Inside, Ethan was getting ready for school, humming a song I didn't recognize. My phone buzzed with an email from Melissa. Final restitution payment confirmed. Case closed. 2 words that hit harder than I expected. Case closed. I looked around my house, the home I'd fought for, and felt peace settle in. No more secrets. No more pretending. Just me and my son, standing in the sunlight, free of everyone who tried to control us. Jason would spend years behind bars. Mark would keep paying until the last cent was repaid. And I would keep living. When Ethan climbed into the car, he looked at me and smiled. "Mom, are we happy now?" I smiled back. "Yeah, sweetheart. We are." Because in the end, I didn't just survive them. I outlasted them. I rebuilt everything they tried to destroy. And that was my revenge. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below and don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.